Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Sushma, for those absolutely wonderful words. I think in all those years of working with you, this is the kindest you've ever been to me. So thanks a ton. And thank you, MRSI, for having me. This is a community of many friends, ex-colleagues, and now many clients for me. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here to be able to present my point of view. Technology in consumer was an incredibly interesting topic. And I decided to actually, I think there's some messages that they can't hear me clearly. Okay, for everybody who can't hear me, I'll just restart. It's fun when a session on tech actually starts with a tech glitch. So wait for, is it good now? All right, maybe I should just lean forward. So let me begin again. I wanted to thank MRSI for having me today as the keynote speaker. I also wanted to thank Sushma, who has never said such kind things about me until today. So I'm incredibly grateful to this forum. The topic is an incredibly interesting one. What is the role of technology, data, analytics in consumer? But I actually wanted to step back and place an even larger provocation in front of all of you. We have all grown up with a certain model of value creation in consumer that we all grew up understanding, learning, refining, and executing on. And today I'm here to tell you that I believe that over the next 5 to 7 years, this model is going to change quite dramatically because of certain disruptions that we see playing out in the entire space, and most importantly, in how the consumer interacts with the world. So today, the session is going to be about the new model of value creation in consumer. And my objective here is not to give you the new model, but to raise a few provocations that will help you think differently, and then maybe talk about how industry leaders are actually dealing with this. So with that, I will begin our session. I hope everybody can hear me now. So the old model of value creation in consumer, what was it about? It was about building mass brands with incredible appeal, iconic status, right? Fantastic advertising, great insights. It was about deeply thought through differentiated product-led innovation, but innovation that took us many years, right? 2 to 3 years to bake and execute on. It was about creating distribution modes, right? With a direct reach that was unparalleled, so that we actually blocked out our products and our competitors on the retail shelves ourselves and maintained a direct line of contact with the retailers, right? It was about functional excellence driving at the heart of our operating model. It was about the best product development, the best insighting. It was about the best marketing and the best sales, but all in their own domains, right? My provocation today is that multiple things are changing, and more importantly, the aspect that is changing the most is actually how our consumer interacts with the world. So I'll talk to you first about the first disruptive trend, which is the digital consumer. The ubiquity of digitization that is leading to how the consumer will change the way they interact in almost every category. And I will actually talk you through some of the staggering numbers that we see on how digital is going to get even deeper into many categories over the next 10 years. The second aspect is actually about influencing and how advertising is now turning into influence, and influence happens through experiences. And how do consumers actually leverage, or consumer brands now leverage technology to land influence? Third, which is very provocatively written, a platform is greater than the sum of its products. And I'll leave it at that because this is a little bit of a tease about how do you expand equity and how do you expand what you stand for across multiple products, platforms, and not just one. Fourth, the digitally connected brand. And if you ask me, never has the business case for being connected and close to your customer, being clearer. And I'll talk to you about how market leaders are looking at leveraging connections with consumers for actually immediate and long-term growth. Fifth, we talk about the democratization of distribution. The one thing that worries most consumer companies that have deep distribution modes in this country today. How will democratized distribution change both how new entrants look at this market as well as how incumbents deal with it? And what is therefore the imperative for large consumer companies to actually deal with the democratization of distribution? And finally, we will talk about my sixth provocation, which is about precision and not just operational excellence across the value chain, which is driven by DNA in consumer companies. So these are really the 6 big trends. And with that, let me get into the very first one that I want to talk to you about, which is about the digital ubiquity in this country today. So, okay. I think we've all seen a dramatic change in our own behavior, both over the last 10 years and also very, very dramatically over the accelerant that was COVID-19. We've all actually become far more digitally savvy. And India has actually gone from 100 million connected consumers to 160 million connected consumers in just 1 year. 13 million of these consumers are actually there are 13 to 14 million daily transactions happening on some or the other e-commerce or other digital platform. What does this really mean in terms of the entire consumer spend, right? India's consumer spend today across products and services is $1 trillion. About 660 billion is products and 340 billion is services. Out of that, today, 60 to 70 billion is the result of these 160 million connected consumers with 13 to 14 million daily transactions every day. By the way, by connected consumer, I don't mean a consumer who's online, but a consumer who's transacting at least once a year. Now, if you look at this number, 60 to 70 billion of a digital economy on a 1 trillion consumer spend base, it is 6 to 7%, not as large as we think it could be in the future, right? And honestly, now I think we should start combining the view of digitized and organized together. So if I look at products, the 660 billion product spend that India does today, 6% digitized, but honestly, about 20% of it is organized and digitized. And this is to the spirit that omnichannel is actually the way of the future. Every organized player will have a digital presence. And honestly, whether it is digitized or organized, this is really about a common consumer experience. So 20% of the 660 billion product spend today is actually digitized or organized. Similarly, of 340 billion service spend, which is actually health, education, these are the big buckets, right? Travel, mobility, 8% is digitized and about 22% is organized or digitized. Now, what's the view of the future? And the view that should actually be excite us, worry us, propel us to action. I think the first view is that this 160 million transacting consumers will be closer to 450 to 500 million transacting consumers by 2030. And this is going to be obviously driven on the back of deeper penetration of smartphones, the continued availability of low data, but also customized for India ecosystems and value propositions available. I think the second big piece that we should also realize is that at the growing pace of organization and digitization in this country, this number of 60 to 70 billion is more likely to be 430 billion on the back of $2.6 trillion. So the Indian consumer spend will go from $1 trillion to $2.6 trillion by 2030. And our digital component of that will be 230 billion. What's even more staggering is that about 40% of it, 900 billion, will be organized or digital, right? And as you think of omnichannel growing much larger, this is something to think about. Products will actually grow both on the organized front and on the digital front. And that's really in the spirit of omnichannel growth. Services will actually go into becoming a lot more aggregated and digitized, and they might actually skip the entire organization view. Now, what does this really mean, right? Big numbers, large billion, trillion dollar numbers. What it means is that if you are a consumer electronics player today, and you see about an average of 30% of your channel contribution coming online, and about another 30 to 40% coming through organized players, this number is going to be 50% online and 35% or 40% in the organized space. Fashion will go from being 6% digital only to being 24% digital only, and from being 30% organized or digitized to being 65% organized or digitized. Grocery, a play where all of us have much vesting, will actually go from 1.5% digital to close to 10%, if not more, digital. It's very hard to predict because a lot of player action will actually determine how this goes. But it has the potential of becoming 10 to 11% digitized. Organized will be much larger because what we need to realize is that it has become an imperative for every organized modern trade player in the space of grocery to have a significant digital presence. And therefore, organized plus digitized together will go from close to about 10% today to close to almost 30%. And this changes your channel structures, it changes your cost to serve, it changes the kind of products you can build, it changes everything. And therefore, understanding this dynamic is incredibly critical, and understanding how the new customer of tomorrow, who will be digitally connected, who will shift a significant amount of their purchases across categories, by the way, including education, including health, on digital/organized platforms, it is important to understand how do we tap and capture their imagination. And that leads to my second point, which is really how do you influence through experiences. And this is really the difference. It is from becoming one transaction-oriented purchase or repurchase to experiential, from selling to fulfillment on the entire journey, from being mass to being incredibly relevant, right? From being proprietary to actually having platforms that stand for something. And we'll talk more about platforms, so I'll let that be for a later time. From being merchant driven and dependent on the last point of interaction to being data driven and knowing exactly what can be actually bought and what's the right kind of mix to sell to a certain type of area or a pin code or a consumer. From being static to dynamic and everyday. And from being digital versus physical to being digital and physical. These are not two separate channels. There's no reason why your digital commerce should not be deeply integrated into, say, marketing, right? And if you look at some brands that have totally got it right, there's some brands on the page. Nike is an incredible journey of omnichannel. Just to break it up and so that you're not just listening to me, I have a video now from Uniqlo. And this was about a marketing activity that they did, where they actually said that you can tailor your preference for a t-shirt down to your mood. It actually taps into a lot of what we've all been playing with, which is the space of neuro readings, but you should absolutely have a look at it, and then let's talk about what it really means. You can play the video, please. You can just play the video. I'm not sure if I can do it. Thank you. I don't know if you can hear the audio in this. Can everybody hear the audio or not really? Okay, I think everyone's saying they can't hear the audio. Is there a way we can type the audio in? Okay, all right.
With over 600 styles, Uniqlo has a t-shirt for every occasion. But with so many options, shoppers couldn't make up their minds. So we read them with UMood, a retail experience like no other. We harnessed neurotechnology to analyse brainwaves of the frontal lobe, the area responsible for our moods. With the Neuro headset on, shoppers were shown a range of stimuli to elicit an emotional response. A custom-built algorithm crunched the data to figure out how they were feeling and recommended t-shirts to match. As shoppers were shown each t-shirt, we monitored how much they liked them to determine the perfect one to suit their mood. We had some great reactions and some questionable ones. But the brain wants what the brain wants. UMood travelled to stores across Australia, helping thousands of people find their perfect t-shirt. Comedian Benjamin Law launched UMood by releasing a video online. And so everyone could get involved, we integrated the technology into Uniqlo.com, as well as Instagram. Uniqlo t-shirt sales soared, and UMood's innovative blend of science, technology and fashion got the entire world talking.
Mind-reading technology that tells you what you really want.
Japanese retailer Uniqlo is using a brain sensor to detect your mood.
Pretty cool. So this has not been done before, people.
Then the next logical step is using this at home, shopping online. Wow, it reads your mind.
Uniqlo solidified their reputation as a true innovator and pioneers in the future of retail. But that's not all we did. There are now talks to roll UMood out in other markets, including Singapore, Japan and China. We paved the way to revolutionise the retail experience. It's time to stop listening to our hearts and start shopping with our heads. After all, you can't argue with science.
Now, this was really about personalization and engagement on a brand that actually took it to the next level and said, listen, you can let your mood decide what t-shirt is right for you. But honestly, while this might be a little bit more marketing and engagement, we know that personalization is actually driving growth. And especially for anybody in retail in the audience today, it is an incredible opportunity actually to try and see how do you target, maybe not n equal to 1 always if you want a D2C platform, but we do see retailers now target pin codes very, very effectively. We do see being able to actually leverage some of this technology to say how should the store be planned, how should it be actually visualized. And this is really about how do you build experiences and engagement. And I think Uniqlo did a rather good job on this one. If you look at my next provocation, which is really a platform is bigger than the sum of its products. And this really goes to the original inspiration. If you look at our tech giants today, they aren't really about just one service or one product, right? Amazon is not just about retail. It is also about video. It is also about loyalty and belonging to a premium club. It is also about Whole Foods and nutrition. It is also about Kindle. It is also about a bunch of other products, whether it is Echo or any of the others that, and Alexa, that actually interface with the consumer in different ways, fulfilling a certain need through the day, which could be for just about accessing anything on the planet, right? Whether it is content, entertainment, products, services, etc. Similarly, if you look at a platform like Google, right? It is not just about the search engine, but it is also about the ability to search for short form content on YouTube. It is also about the Android system and being connected. It is about being able to search places on maps and many other services that latch onto the platform. So honestly, consumer tech is the original inspiration for platforms. But what they've actually told us is that you don't need to build high walls and barriers around a single product and say, no, I'm just about search and nothing else. I do search extremely well. That's not really the way the consumer is looking at it. The consumer is actually bound by a central thought, which is actually, and we all know this, it's the value of the insight. And today, if you see some of the consumer brands that have scaled incredibly fast, whether it is the Honest Company and their toxin-free platform, or it is Kylie Jenner and her entire play on cosmetics, or it is our very own Mama Earth. These brands don't stand for a product category. they stand for a core benefit or a core belief, whether it is free from toxins, phenomenal, looks, whatever it is. But there is a core insight that drives your ability to actually, migrate to multiple products. I think there are some tech issues. Let me just see the messages. Just read the messages. I think there's some tech issues. Okay. So can everybody else hear me? I see some messages around audio still being weak. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So really the inspiration for platforms is coming from our tech giants, whether it is Amazon, which never saw itself as a retailer, or Google that never really saw its limited role in the world as enabling search. How do we translate this into multiple aspects of consumer? Because the consumer is actually willing to give a fair amount of license to us to be able to expand our core propositions just beyond beyond our limited product domains. And we are seeing new age brands do this, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of the incumbents and the traditional giants do that as well. If you can just click forward for me, thank you. My fourth provocation is around the value of being connected to the consumer. And this connection, I'm not talking about an esoteric emotional connection alone. I'm actually talking about understanding consumer data. And whether it is from the perspective of personalization, driving repeats, understanding consumer behavior at an n equal to 1 level has never been more important. And I'm going to talk to you about the case of an incredible, iconic specialty retailer in the world of cosmetics. It's a US-based case study where they actually built $120 million incrementally over their growth plan. And you can imagine that on the base in the US in a single year is actually quite an incredible achievement. And they actually hit a 14% additional efficiency on media while doing that. So very happy to walk you through this case. Someone can flip the slide for me. Thank you. The core impact lever over here was personalization. Using consumer analytics to actually drive experiences and campaigns that were customized to a level and to a cohort that was actually incredibly sharp. It wasn't always n equal to 1, by the way, but it was incredibly sharp. We were actually talking to small collectives of people and not overall everybody who had tried. And the multiple channels used were search, display, social affiliates, everything possible, right, to actually reach this customer. However, we all know that digital can be actually quite expensive. And so can, whether it is driving your own e-commerce platform or driving it through aggregators, it is an expensive media. Therefore, a very, very sharp eye on media effectiveness is important. And you need to know as much what you should do more of, and as much as you know, as much as you should know what you should not do, right? And I think taking those calls and having more failures and successes from a number of tests perspective, not from a scale perspective, but from a number of tests perspective is incredibly important, right? So for this individual player, the foundational enablers that allowed them to do this was an agile marketing muscle. Now, honestly, I hate words like agile because they stand for everything. But what it effectively meant was that you take action every day. And that happens when you run what we call a digital lighthouse, which is an everyday view on the tests that you mount and the tests that you stop, right? An incredibly brutal, non-judgmental lesson to where you fail. Four, it was about omnichannel measurement. So they were fortunate enough to have their own stores, their own site. They of course had aggregator plays and social networks to look at, but they had an incredible amount of data that helped omnichannel measurement and a common view of the customer. And I think when it comes to a lot of the brands, and we can talk about this in the Q&A, in the consumer world in India, where you don't have your own platform or data, how do you actually leverage platforms to be able to, third-party platforms to be able to understand consumer behavior better is actually a skill in itself. 5, market enablement. Are you being able to track, measure everything? And finally, capability building. Because honestly, this is not one insight, one brand. It is actually a multitude of insights, almost a catalog of insights and multiple actions on a daily basis. tests, and these are all numbered real tests, by the way. This is actually anonymized but real. These were all individual tests that were done and laddered on two axes. What was the impact, which is the y-axis, and the amount of effort, which is actually highest on the left and least on the right hand side. And we said the ones that have the least effort and the highest impact should actually go live first. And in doing so, you were able to prioritize actually some incredible number of tests and lead to that $120 million of impact. If I go to just one of them, right, to actually tell you how it worked, what we realized when we looked at consumer data over time was that driving the second purchase for a first-time user within 2 months was incredibly important, because you saw a massive drop-off, almost a 30% drop-off after that. And therefore, being able to catch the second purchase in time became the big agenda. Now, the timing of how you actually interacted with the customer was different for different channels. If the first purchase was online, 3 weeks was the most optimal time. And honestly, the only way to reach this insight, no consumer can tell you this, is actually to try multiple things and figure out what wins. And therefore, what we realized was time after time, when you typically target a consumer 3 weeks after their first purchase, you were able to get a far higher hit rate, right? Almost a 20% lift on online purchase in the third week. Similarly, if it was an in-store purchase to begin with, then within a week, you actually had the biggest lift digitally to be able to convert the consumer again, because it typically left something back that they wanted to actually go back for. And that actually enabled an incredible amount of second-time buys and a far higher efficiency in the way we were able to tackle the retargeting. Honestly, this logic actually even extends to how we spend money on our aggregator platforms. So I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A. Democratization of distribution, and I think all of us are in the middle of this, so I will not I will not spell out the basics, but fundamentally we all know that there are incredible inefficiencies that exist in indirect trade, fundamentally, right? I mean, even indirect trade, but first of all, in indirect trade over here. And if you look at, if I have to just talk about some that are outside our immediate control, I don't know how many of you know this, but the average Class B store in this country that would transact about 4 lakhs a month is actually making 7,000 to 10,000 rupees lesser every month in their take home. And that's because there's an incredible squeeze on the retail economics of the middle stores, not the top. The top are well pampered, almost. I mean, if you track their cost to serve, it's close to modern trade. If you look at the long tail, there's an incredible amount of churn. But if you look at the middle, which is actually, you know, the largest bunch of our sales are concentrated there, they are actually making far lower money, which puts the entire ecosystem in stress, and it makes them look for other options. We did a ethnography actually in trade, where we made people stand in stores across a variety of stores, across a variety of regions for almost a week. And what we realized on sheer observation was that if you are a Class A or upper end of Class B store in a city like Bombay, you see 300 salesmen a week. And can you imagine giving 300 orders, even on a daily basis with 7 days a week? That is an incredible amount of history. And therefore, there is a lot of send back. There's a lot of average, not really thought through orders being put in. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's a shopkeeper overwhelmed actually, or giving it to their salesman. We also realized that when we tracked lost sales or inefficiencies, it was the Class B stores that had the biggest gaps, both from the availability of assortment, from the absenteeism of the salesman, from the lack of credit being extended adequately, even when directly reached, and multiple other reasons, right? And therefore, I mean, my limited point over here is that inefficiencies exist, and where inefficiencies exist, digital can disrupt. And to that extent, what I wanted to talk to you about was that what we are actually seeing today, at least in some of the core cities, is that the traditional trade is on the way to getting disrupted. They are disruptors of all sorts. This is not just eB2B that I talk about. eB2B is a part of it, but whether it is logistics players who are actually now far more efficient at getting products across, whether it is financial services that are looking at this as a catchment that they can actually tap into. This is a space of a lot of play. And I think the point that I'd like to make over here is that this is not just true of India. This is actually true of multiple markets. And I've mapped three emerging markets with indirect trade over here: Philippines, Brazil, and India. And if you actually have a look at them, they, if you look at the disruptions across the value chain, there is, of course, EB2B, which you are all familiar with, or digitized distribution, where people use the scale and efficiencies of common warehousing and logistics and unlock an incredible value proposition for the retailer, which is everyday ordering, next day delivery, in some cases even credit, right? Automated. And we see this, whether it's the grocery in Philippines, whether it is actually consumer company-led platforms in Brazil. Bees is an AV InBev platform. Compra, I think, is a Unilever platform. Similarly, in India, we've seen Udaan grow, we've seen Reliance grow, and we are also seeing Unilever Shikhar grow actually now. Similarly, if you look at the second leg, we see a number of financial services companies are actually now interested in the space of digitizing payments. And that actually gives access to standardized credit. It also gives access to consumer data at some point if you can get that data out. And we know that there are multiple large and small players actually operating in this space. Finally, direct to consumer, where we've all spoken about e-commerce enough, and I'm sure it's familiar, but yeah, it's something that I just wanted to leave. So these are the three big disruptions. However, what we've seen coming from China is that it is the omni-channel ecosystems that actually straddle most of these disruptions that ultimately become dominant, whether it is the AliLST or the JDXT ecosystems in China. They today command a lion's share of this entire disruption. And we know that multiple ecosystems in India are underway, right? Whether it's Jio, whether it's Google building its own, whether it is actually Amazon mode, whether it's Flipkart, Walmart. There are multiple opportunities to create these ecosystems. I think if you are a CPG company, what is happening is that what was a very simple route to market now looks incredibly complicated. And as you look at tackling this complication in the future, please look at it with two imperatives. How do you reimagine your core and build the new? Because doing one without the other would not be adequate. Finally, the one thing that helps us across this is actually data and the better availability of data today than any time before. Today, whether we want it at a pin code level, we have affluence, spends by category, we have footfalls, we have areas of interest, we have building, construction, we have multiple sources of reasonably good data that can actually come together to form a view that we never had. And that actually enables us to pull that along with our incredibly granular data that we collected over so many years to define multiple front-end use cases. By the way, DNA is not a front-end capability alone. You should look at it from a middle and back end as well, as you build a core capability of driving DNA within the organization. This is a bit of a double click on how you can actually reimagine your sales and distribution on the back of DNA, which helps you get not just the right assortment based analytics, but also the right gamification to be able to ensure that your salesman stays on track, to actually having a suggested order model that saves an incredible amount of time in the store, and many other use cases in between. I won't be able to do justice to it. However, this, even on the most conservative basis, we believe that just a few front-end sales use cases plus with some marketing thrown in can unlock almost 5% incremental growth in a year, and that is actually quite a large pile, and it can help justify funding the change fundamentally. Finally, one provocation that I'd like to leave you with. What will it take to create a new model of value creation in consumer? And I think this is really the big burning question, right? And I think it will have to become, we have to look at ourselves as big corporates as well as new businesses that are coming up. And we know that they are different, right? The mindset in corporates is about being real. It is about driving profitability year on year. It is about, deep industry expertise and relying on our past experiences, right? On new businesses, well, the expectations are just unreasonable. And that's the first thing anyone who transitions from a traditional corporate to a new business will tell you. And digital first is the vision always, right? Because there's a fundamental belief that you will be able to solve the problems with technology on the side. Corporate layers, I don't even need to explain. But honestly, with new businesses, lesser layers, clear responsibilities, faster decision making, and ultimately only an eye on the goal. And finally, the mood, right? Which is how do we challenge things, hierarchical communication? Are we very, even down to the way we dress, right? The mood in new businesses is about transparent communication. And the other day I was talking to a startup founder. He told me something very, very interesting. He said, I always try to hire people who have some interest in the performance arts. So I said, you run a consumer tech company, which is on the boundary of fintech and I don't know what else, but why do you hire people with a performance arts background? And he actually said something very interesting. He said, so that for them, the world is always their audience and not their boss. I don't want people who please me. I want people who drive products that they're proud of standing and they want to hear the applause for. So I found that very interesting. Honestly, I think many people agree with this. This is a 100-people survey across corporate species, incubators, and accelerants that say that it is actually the way we work and the way our policies and politics that actually end up slowing us down. And finally, I love this quote, right? The battle between every startup and incumbent comes down to whether the startup will gain distribution before the incumbent cracks the innovation. And that actually, and I'm talking about, we have SBI that built Yono, an incredible achievement, right? 30 million users in month one, right? An incredible amount of transactions, the largest affiliate to Amazon. There are multiple things about Yono that make it an absolutely incredible innovation. Apollo 24/7, a healthcare company that actually put together an e-pharmacy plus e-consultation plus diagnostics to bring together phenomenal equity, but now in an omnichannel healthcare ecosystem. So people are doing it, and we believe that there are two things. Incumbents today have an unfair advantage. You have a capability of being able to understand the place that you belong, to understand your consumers best, to understand the value metrics that actually drive a successful company. You don't have to discover this. This is your unfair advantage. The unnecessary burden that we carry is, are we attractive to the best tech talent out there, the best data talent out there? Are we letting our bureaucracy come in the way and our multiple rounds of alignment? Are we actually releasing, at least in some parts of our business, financial pressure so that we can prioritize growth over profit, at least for some time? And that, I think, is an important question to ask, because that, I believe, is the holy grail. The time when incumbents actually free themselves of a lot of the baggage that they carry very unnecessarily for flexibility and speed is when the next unicorns will actually start getting born in corporate India and not in the startup world. And with that, I bring the to a close. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Kanika. It's always a pleasure listening to you, and I think you've actually made me feel I'm from Baba Adam Zamane, where it was all about mass market brand building. I mean, I've grown up with that, and I'm sure we worked on things like that. But I certainly feel I think I should connect with you much more. I probably am not doing enough of that. But it was really inspiring listening to these 6 new trends, right? I mean, I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight. I've heard it in various parts, but I think bringing it all together and ensuring that the DNA in every aspect of the value chain, it's stuck in my mind. And thank you so much for that. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to ask one question, and this is a question that I think most companies, are struggling at this time. Where we think of personalization, there is an increased focus on privacy, right? And data info, user info, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Just wanted to understand whether personalization will still continue to grow, and what are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think the entire view on privacy and not being able to have cookie-based data, etc., is it's obviously going to change many things that we actually fundamentally intrusive about, Uber, like extra personalization, going much, much deeper than needed. But Sushma, I think, for most companies, most consumer companies, I'm leaving a few tech giants apart, right? Personalization down to the level where we breach individual privacy is such a long way away. I see an incredible amount of opportunity being unlocked in cohorts that are just better targeted. If you know, right, even from a cohort perspective, not an n equal to 1 perspective, if you know cohort-based behavior, which is saying that, for instance, we were doing a piece of work where we realized that people who were buying, chocolates were more prone to kids products, right? And that's really, it doesn't take a genius to crack that, right? Like it really doesn't. And we realized that was incredibly successful. We then said, okay, moms who are very interested in health might also buy other healthy products, and that was a bomb. But the idea is that even if we can get to that level, to unlock so much opportunity, I think we are a long way away from where data privacy will actually end up blocking our growth. Actually, right now, even at a cohort level, we will have enough opportunity.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kanika. Sorry, guys, if there are questions more for Kanika, do keep coming. And what we'll do is probably post it in the MRSI site, and I'll certainly have Kanika answer them as we go along. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I'll now request Ritesh to come and start the paper session.